Now let's have a closer look at it. When we talk of authorization in a database, there are again two distinct categories, because there are two categories of resources. Number one resource is the operations. Okay. Now it involves the various kind of actions which you can perform, like creation of objects, modification of objects, or using the system resources like your various memory components and your CPU. Now this is mostly taken care of as a part of our server hardening, most of the time implemented by using appropriate user policies or group policies. The other important resource in a database is the data itself and the operations which are performed on this particular data, like insert, update, delete, that is basically changing the data, and retrieval of the data, which is the select. Now we are going to concentrate on authorization related to this data, that is insert, update, delete and select of data. Now for this particular operation, what all methods of authorization are available with us? Profile based authorization, like just now I discussed, more or less caters to authorization related to the system resources and not your data operations. So for data operations, what is there at our disposal is SQL based authorization related to objects, which is achieved by your grant and revoke commands. You can make it easy for the data administrator. I said data administrator, not database administrator. These two are essentially different tasks, and most of the times are performed by different people. So when you are talking of a data administrator, this is the person who is responsible to devise appropriate authorization model for your particular business schema. So your data administrator can basically improve on his task efficiency by allocating these grants to a role or a group, or in some softwares these two are separate concepts, to both, so that your overhead of granting these to individual users is reduced. All you have to do is grant these permissions to the group or a role or both, and associate a user with that particular group or role, or sometimes both, and then there is a hierarchy. So role-based authorization is nothing but administration-wise simplified version of your grant and revoke. Of course, it can be made more secure by putting role activation passwords and things like that. But essentially, it caters to the same kind of operation. Only your administrative overhead is reduced. Then we have something which is called as view-based authorization, program-based authorization, which we are going to discuss in detail now. And then, of course, there are some high-end features which are made available by several vendors, like level security, database vault, virtual private database, which may be inbuilt, which may be paid plugin, which may not be available in some softwares, or the way they are implemented or the syntaxes may differ from one vendor to other. Now, let us first understand this SQL injection thing in detail with the help of an example, and then we will realize why basically this authorization is important and will be helpful in protecting our data from any kind of SQL injection attack in case our application server or front-end applications are manipulated. So I am moving on to the SQL console. Here basically to show you an example of the SQL injection attack, we will be using a sample schema from Oracle database, which is a Scott schema. And the schema has got one table named EMP1. Now this table has got columns like employee number, name, job, manager, hire date, some salary, commission, department number. And it also has got the address and email columns for that employee. Now there is some data in this table. Now let's consider this employee one table. Basically consists of the data of the employees of that organization, and the organization has got some inbuilt portal, okay, some kind of a portal built specially to cater to their needs, which is the front end form, which is made available to these employees, and basically they are allowed to access certain data about themselves and modify certain data like address or email about themselves through this portal form. Now this portal form in turn, just like we had seen the typical architecture, so here on the employee machine lies the form, which in turn connects to the corresponding web server. The application server takes care of the validation, and in your database server is somewhere this employee schema, which this Scott schema, which has got this EMP1 table. Okay, so basically the employee is allowed to change the address and email. Okay, and for this in the form there are two text fields which will be filled in, because you have to keep it open. The employee will be giving the new mail ID or new address, and may probably will click on save or change address or change email button, and in turn the code inside the front end will pose some kind of an update query which is fired on this EMP1 table in the back end, right? Now in order to save on time, what I'll be doing is, instead of showing you the query being fired through front end, we are going to fire the corresponding thing through back end using a PL/SQL code. Now I hope people can see this code clearly. So here basically I have written some code which is accepting the values from the user. So essentially on your application server, by using whatever is the programming language, there will be some code written inside, and these values of table name, value 1, column 2, value 2, this will be actually coming in from your form text fields, which will be captured, and then it will be formulating a query, SQL query, which is fired on the backend table, right? This is how the thing will be. Now if we try to execute this particular query, which is very common in your front-end applications, then we can see that, see here, as per what we discussed earlier, we have seen that basically the philosophy is all these kind of validation and access control is to be taken care of by your application server, and once the bare minimum security settings are done, which is actually a part of your server hardening, then there is no other defense on the back end in case the front end defense fails. So basically we will have an example here. This is the query which is fired by the front end, say, and the inputs which are passed on by the user, actually this is a facility to change either your address, See, we had seen the table design, either your address or email, for which you have to put in what you want to change, and you have to give the new value of the address or your email. Now, instead of passing on the corresponding details which are legitimate, let's say here, instead of passing on the corresponding legitimate details, that is here for that specific employee, I want to change my address and I give my new address. Here my employee number basically is, I have taken a very small toy example. So employee number is supposed to be for validation, and instead of giving the appropriate value, basically say I try to bypass this check by giving something like this. Okay. I say I am allowed to change actually only my address and email, but I try to change my salary, rather salary for everybody here, because you see here the condition I have given is 1 is equal to 1, which will be embedded in the where clause. So basically it will happen for all the rows. Okay. And now if I fire, say, the select query, can you see all the salaries are modified? I will just cancel this change for our further thing. So basically this is how your SQL injection takes place. Now how do we resolve this and still not let our query execution efficiency get affected? The solution is simple. We would go back to this authorization methods now. The key is never share, first of all, never share your owner schema. That is the schema in which all the set of tables are there having the business data. Never share the owner schema credentials to front-end applications for connecting to database. They should not be connecting to the database as the owner user. Okay. So what basically we should do? We should basically request our database administrator to create a separate user. Okay. To create a separate user. Here I have summarized the corresponding things. So basically request your DBA to create a separate user. Now some of the softwares are having a concept of schema, which is a set of tables catering to business needs, which are the logical lockers, and you can associate one or more users with the schema, whereas some other vendor softwares have this concept that your user and your schema is one as the same thing. For example, in Oracle, your schema and your user are actually the same thing. Okay. In that case, we would create a dummy user who will not have any objects, any data in the particular schema. Okay. So basically request your database administrator to create a dummy user like this. Now here I have for demonstration already created a user named app1. Then put in little more efforts from your side. First of all, find out what all operations need to be performed by your front-end firms on the data. What kind of data retrieval is needed? What kind of insert, updates and deletes? Once you get the information, write the corresponding functionality in your owner schema. Say for example, for our current discussion, the need is you want to give the employees right to modify their address as well as email ID. Okay, but not to modify any other column like salary, commission, either for themselves or for any other user. Okay. Then in that case, what we can do is we can basically write a function in the owning schema, something like this, which accepts. Now for here the validation, the employee number is taken, so that is one of the parameter. Then what field needs to be changed and its new value, right? So my function takes these three input parameters, and what it is returning is just a true or false flag. Okay. Now inside this function, first of all, I put in from the database side the validation checks. Now please understand, here I did not increase on the execution time by putting in the validation checks for correctness of data, because that I can rely on my front end. Okay, if my front end is doing that, then I need not spend time again on making sure that the data is correct. Okay, what I'm looking for is a probable SQL injection attack, and it is worth writing some validation code for mitigating, blocking this SQL injection attack. Now I have put in only two validation examples which are very simple. This employee number of mine, I expect it to be a number, right? I expect it to be a number. But most of the times, even in your table, you don't put it as a number, because basically if you put it as a number, any leading zeros will be trimmed. So those leading zeros which are meaningful, I want to retain, I will have to make it a text field, right? That is varchar 2 or varchar or string or something. Depends on what is your software, right? So here I use a simple function to actually convert it to number, okay? And try to put it in one local variable which is a number. Now if at all here the hacker has put in some additional thing by concatenating, see it's a text field. So by concatenating, if the hacker has tried to put in some additional things like some additional command, or has put in the keyword or and put in some condition which will be always true to bypass the validation check, that is to bypass the where condition, then here itself it will give rise to an error, and in the error handling routine I'm just returning a false flag. I'm not telling any details to the hacker, to the front end basically, because then front end may by mistake display those details to the hacker, and the hacker may get some additional info and capitalize, and next time when poses the attack, it may go through. So it basically is returning just a false flag to the front end, right? The second validation is again very simple, very trivial. It is checking this P field, okay? This P field, this P val is supposed to be the new address or new mail ID. Now suppose again an SQL injection attack is been posed. Then here there is one very simple example. This being Oracle code, the concatenation operator is double vertical bar. There is no reason why in your address you should have double vertical bar, right? So if at all double vertical bar is found in this P value, then I know that this is a malicious input. I am raising an error, thereby not going to further operations, and again in my error handling routine I am just returning a false flag to the front end indicating the operation cannot be done. Okay, now we can make it more sophisticated check by adding so many things, and in the exception handling we can also put in additional actions like finding out what is the IP from where the hacker is connected, or any other category of things, right? Any relevant additional actions we can take care of in the exception handling routine. Now further I am making the thing secure by this thing. See, what they are allowed to do, change only address and email. If it is anything else, if I am a legitimate user, I put in my employee number correct, but then instead of, I'm not posing any SQL injection attack, but I am trying to alleviate my privileges that instead of passing on address, I'm passing on salary and trying to modify my salary. Then in that case, again the operation will not take place. It is going to return false. So basically, by writing a function, I'm restricting what the front-end application can do. And it cannot do anything, even if it is manipulated. Even if your front-end is manipulated, it cannot do anything beyond what this function can do. Now I make things further secure. I don't let this function code be seen by the front end by any chance. Okay. So I will not create this function in the schema which is allowed for the front end application. What I will do, I will create this in a owner schema and then grant only execute privilege on this particular function to this application user schema or application user, right? I will grant only execute on this. Further, why should I disclose to this application user whose function this is? Because thereby it would know which is the owner schema. That is, the username is known for the database. Half the work is done. So I would hide that by requesting the DBA to create a public synonym for this particular function belonging to Scott schema. See, any objects which don't belong to your schema you want to access, you have to append the corresponding schema name with it, right? So basically for this whole thing, I'll get a public synonym created by the DBA, or will ask the DBA to grant rights to create a public synonym to this owning schema. And now, how my front-end application code is going to change with all this? Now my front-end application code will change. Now it is not going to pose any kind of update query. What it is expected to do? It is just expected to give a call to this function. And what it knows is this global synonym name which is given for the function, which it just changes, which gives no idea about what is the original function name, what is the owning schema for the function, what the function is doing. Basically, this user application 1 is just given execute privilege, so cannot see or modify the code of this function which is known to him with the name changes. Actual function name is something else. Actual function name is fchange details, right? fchange dt. But then what is the name which is known to my front end? Name which is known to my front end is changes. And what front end can do? Front end can just give a call to this. Now through front end, instead of this particular format, there will be execute, okay, where whatever the function is returning will be taken in either a Boolean variable, or maybe if the corresponding front end doesn't permit Boolean, then you will have to change your function slightly and have some kind of convention of returning 0, 1, 2, 3 like that, right? So now what my front end is doing? Front end is just calling this function. Now let's try it again. Now this time we are not trying it through the owner user. We have got here another user who is the app1. If I try to see what is there in this particular schema, there is nothing. This is an empty thing, dummy user. Okay, this is a dummy user or a dummy schema. Now actually in SQL Server I can just create a user who is just given execute privilege on that, Whereas this being Oracle, schema and user are equivalent. They are the same. That's why I created this dummy user who does not have anything. Now, your front end is connecting via this user and is basically posing this kind of a command, right? Which is execution of this particular function, which is known to the front end with the name changes. And basically front end has no clue what is the actual name, whether this is the function and things like that, right? Now let's say again I pose this particular malicious input, that is I try to bypass the condition. I don't know what is the valid employee number, so I just try to bypass the condition. Okay, then I try to modify the salary, which is actually not allowed. See, all it shows is invalid input values. I try again. This time I try to give a legitimate value. Okay, I try to give a legitimate value, say one of the existing values. 7521 is one of the existing values. So say I am actually an employee, so I give my employee number, which is 7521, but then I am not allowed to change my salary, and I try to modify my salary. Again it is saying invalid input values, right? So this is how, by putting in little more effort and devising appropriate authorization, I can mitigate the SQL injection attack very successfully. Now there are several variations to this. Basically we can restrict the view of the front end by using the same thing. Say we can have this kind of a code. Instead of giving the select privilege to this app one user, which is the front end connection user, I can create a view to restrict what the front end user can see from my data globally on this view, right? If your front end is just willing to retrieve data, then view may be a good option. If your front end is trying to modify data, then a procedure or a function in the back end will be a good option. Just create a procedure or function and let the application user just have execute privilege. If the front end is trying to retrieve a data, then create a view with the restricted rows as well as columns, and grant appropriate rights on the view to the application user. So the view will be restricted to only that. Of course, you can have further variations in this. Instead of creating a view and returning, you may write a function which returns. Most of the modern RDBMSs allow you to have complex user-defined data types and collections of user-defined data types. So your function can return that complex data type or a collection of complex data types to the front end, which can be mapped easily to the front end class design or front end XML formats, and return the data also via a function instead of creating a view. Or you may want to restrict the operations on your data like update, etc., by taking help of a view and an instead of trigger. Or you can use a combination of procedure or function, view instead of trigger, or your normal DML trigger on a table, that is a trigger which is written on insert, update and delete operations of a particular table. But keep in mind, when we are using a trigger, there is always a performance penalty. So as far as possible, try to restrict to using a view and giving permission on that view to a separate user, or achieving the task by a procedure or a function in the back end. So this particular thing is called as our program-based authorization. Now let's quickly revise the things which we were discussing earlier related to authorization. With this example, now we have understood why it is important on the database side to have proper authorization irrespective of the kind of authorization which is controlled by your front ends. We realize the restriction on SQL grant and revoke is that, okay, still segregating the application user, that is the front end user, from the owner schema will help us to restrict only certain operations. But then essentially those will be for your entire table, so you can achieve a granular level by using view-based authorization. And we have seen an example how very simple program-based authorization can improve on our authorization control and in turn grant more security to our data, even in the events when our front-end operations or front-end servers are manipulated. This is a very effective technique for blocking your SQL injection attack, and we are not using any hyphen-da features like virtual private database or label security or database vault. Of course, label security and database vault cater to a slightly different need, that is protecting data from privileged database users. But then instead of using virtual private database, which is not only a penalty in terms of cost but also in terms of your execution efficiency, this is something which is very much available and simpler, and not only it will improve on the security, but it will also improve on your efficiency, because instead of posing a query from front end, getting the details, then posing a query to modify the data, let all these operations be handled at back end. Those will be happening very efficiently as compared to this frequent communication between front end and back end, and they will be carried out in more secure manner as well. So basically, let's summarize whatever we have learned so far in this small brief session. Basically, we need to implement principle of least privileges, separation of duties and encapsulation. Principle of least privileges, that is basically your strategy should be that of a miser. Never allow your front ends to connect to the owner schema. Always create a dummy user, okay, and grant only the bare minimum required rights to this dummy application user which is created on your database. This will also bring in the separation of duties. Your owner is something else. Your operations execute, that is your functions procedures execute with owner's privilege, and this application user has only execute privilege on this functions procedures, so cannot even modify the code of this functions or procedures or see it. Is restricted by only what your functionality can do. Okay, so basically restrict your application user view as well as the operations the application user can perform. Use appropriate encapsulation approach. See, this is basically, we should be all inspired by these hotels. They never tell us what are the actual ingredients, right? They just serve us the ready food. Similarly, your front end should be served the ready result. Now it is none of front end business whether it is coming from a table named EMP1 or it is coming from 3 different tables. What are my actual column names? What are the column data types, sizes, etc. is none of front end business. All this you can very well encapsulate into these kind of routines which you can create on your owner schema. And you can purposely put in altogether different names for the parameters. You may add dummy parameters. As a parameter, some value is passed which you process, perform some arithmetic or logical operations on it, and then actually process some table. Okay? Your front end is thinking it's a single table on which it is passing on the data. Inside your functionality is actually firing insert queries on different tables with altogether different names, different column names, and different column data types and sizes. All this is kind of encapsulation is very much possible when we basically adopt this approach that as far as possible, no SQL query through front end will just call my back-end functionalities. Then the simple feature which is available in almost all databases, which is a view, is really very useful for achieving fine-grained access control over your table data. Instead of granting privileges on the table, which has to be essentially granted for all rows, if not for all columns, you please create an appropriate view which may be taking data from multiple tables, okay, and grant access to the view and not to the tables themselves. Now, it's not necessary that we always use the view approach when we are trying to retrieve data, or sometimes you may want to modify some data and then get back some data based on that. In that case, yes, this is precisely the reason why user-defined data types or any kind of collections or XML data types are provided into our relational databases. No one uses them in your basic table column data types because that brings down your efficiency. It is precisely to cater to these kind of needs that these special data types are made available. So let your function return the result by making use of the appropriate these kind of special data types if required, as well as the collections. That will bring in more security and most of the times more efficiency, unless and until your collection population is taking too much time. In that case, you can shift back to the view approach, and please hide all these details by using column aliases in your view definition and synonyms for any of these objects like views, procedures, functions, package procedures, and package functions which we are creating. Okay, so these are some of the very simple things. And finally, we have to review all our object accesses very regularly, what rights are given to which user on which data objects and which functionalities which are in turn processing which data, right? So a regular review and limiting is also equally important, and most of the times here our ready-made tools will not help us because a tool would not know what is going to be the corresponding table name or the usernames, or what all kind of business front-end applications are there for which one or more what dummy users are created, right? So here it requires basically more effort on our side to first of all implement this. See, it is obvious if I allow my front end to directly access my owner schema, I don't have to create these kind of additional functionalities or things like views, which will reduce my development time. But then it is always worth that you spend some more time on these kind of things to improve on your security, right? Now basically I have finished the